Hi there, it's Erica Leon, registered dietitian, and welcome to my webinar. We'll be talking today about emotional eating, lessons on emotional eating at midlife and menopause, particularly during these trying times. Today is September 11th, and we've had so much going on in our world, in my country, USA, and I want to acknowledge that these are very challenging times and really do lead many people to eat without hunger. And that's really what I want to talk about today. So, who in the world am I, and why am I qualified to talk about emotional eating in the world today? So, I am a registered dietitian. I've been a dietitian for more than 35 years, and I work primarily with people who are struggling with disordered eating, overcoming an eating disorder, really just trying to make peace with food and their body image. And as I said, it's very, very challenging in the world that we live in right now. And I, in particular, specialize in working with midlife and menopausal women. We have unique challenges in that our bodies are changing and our hormones are going up and down. And all of this impacts our ability to feel good in our bodies. So, what am I hoping to achieve in this webinar that you're attending? I'm hoping to have you understand why you don't need to villainize emotional eating and that it's really a normal and natural part of our lives. So instead, really learn to work with it, to learn how to identify when stress and emotional eating does show up for you, and to learn some tools and strategies for self-soothing without always turning to food. Even though food is totally fine, we want to find other tools and strategies to use. I'm also hoping to help you see that diets and diet culture just create both deprivation and increase binge and emotional eating. And I want to explain a little bit how diets and diet culture, where they come from, what the origins are, and really learn how to challenge it. I want to help you understand the roller coaster hormonal shifts that happen that influence our coping strategies in perimenopause. And I really want to explain how a non-diet approach to midlife and menopause called intuitive eating really is a self-care strategy and one that I really promote. To recognize how diets in particular create deprivation, and that diets actually are rooted in racist patriarchal standards of beauty. And so this could be an entire course, let alone one component of a webinar. But I'm going to mention it just to give you some information about it. And also, diets increase binge and emotional eating. So they're very counterproductive. I'm going to talk a little bit about the roller coaster hormonal shifts that occur that influence our coping strategies in perimenopause, and midlife, and really explain why a non-diet approach to midlife and menopause, which is called intuitive eating, it's a self-care strategy. So this is a huge topic. It's a big topic. Why do we eat? Well, we know we eat for physical hunger, and I always invite my clients to think about what does hunger feel like in our bodies. Emotional hunger is different than physical hunger, and it can take many, many forms. It can be wanting to eat because something tastes delicious, sensory gratification, not wanting to stop. It can be eating for comfort, eating because we're wanting to be distracted from something that's distressing. It could be you're eating because you're bored, or you just don't want to feel your feelings, and it's sort of a moment of sedation. And for some people, it can actually be punishment. I wanted to share this wonderful quote by Karen Ricks, who is an amazing trained chef and Montessori school educator, and she also brings anti-racism education to her cooking classes. She has her own Facebook group. I would encourage all of you to check it out. It's called We Play With Our Food. And she came into my intuitive eating Facebook group to share this information at the very beginning of the pandemic when we were all eating emotionally. She said it would be so easy to beat myself up for emotional eating right now. Instead, I'm thankful for the grace and kindness with which I have learned to treat myself since beginning my intuitive eating journey. And I just thought this was such a nice way of describing what happens when you learn about intuitive eating instead of dieting, and you really understand that emotional eating is really just one component of normal eating. So I wanted to share that, and I think that Karen is very special. Go check her out. So let's talk about this emotional eating that we want to give ourselves grace about. It is normal to eat emotionally, or comfort eat, because eating is nurturing. It's part of a healthy relationship with food, and we want to be able to stay present with it. But eventually this eating emotionally, meaning not out of hunger, it doesn't feel good anymore. The food stops tasting good. And so a lot of people ask me what the difference is between emotional and binge eating. And I really like to describe it as a continuum. It's when we lose touch with what I call the three H's: how much we're eating, how we're coping, and how often we use food to cope. So, it's one thing having emotional eating, but as it continues, if it continues and continues, it could turn into binge eating and eventually binge eating disorder, which leads to a lot of stress and shame and self-loathing. And we do have a criteria for clinical diagnosis of binge eating disorder, and it is found in what we call the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, 5th edition. And the criteria really involves eating a large amount of food in a short period of time while feeling a lack of control over the eating episode, as well as intense shame about the behavior. And so I asked the question, do you ever feel out of control when you eat? A lot of people that I've worked with who are recovering from eating disorders or disordered eating will say they feel like they're binge eating. And then I kind of find out it's, well, more of a subjective binge. Maybe they've not been eating enough and they feel like every time they eat more than they want. So I think it's important to understand and identify, what's really going on. And if you are concerned at all, to speak to a mental health professional. So this thing that I just mentioned about not eating enough and feeling deprived, it is often a source of binge eating. So for many people, this deprivation is this major cause of overeating and then feeling out of control, because restrictive eating, or another word for it is dieting, often results in this pendulum swinging from restriction to binge eating. Restrict, binge, restrict, binge. And it is why I really encourage people to give up diets and to start to normalize their relationship with food. And I'm going to talk now about this what I call the restrict binge cycle, because this deprivation, again, does lead to potentially binge eating. So when someone is restricting their food to lose weight, which, by the way, is the whole world, everyone, we all talk about needing to be a certain size, needing to lose weight, having to fit into those jeans. When we go on a diet, we eventually start to think about food all the time. Just think about all the diets that you've been on. And I know if you're listening to this webinar, you have been on diets before. And you know that at some point you start to have obsessive thoughts about it, whether it be calorie counting or thinking about points or macros or something. And eventually something happens and you give in, you break the diet. And it could be that you saw a tray of cookies on the counter. It could be that you went to a party and you said, oh, screw it, I'm really, really wanting this food. So you give in, and then you start to eat, and all of a sudden, you get really famished and you start to binge, you eat more than you wanted, you feel out of control. And then you know what you did. The next morning you wake up and you're going to double down on your weight loss efforts. And then it goes right back into this cycle: restrict food to lose weight, start to think about food all the time, give in, start to binge. It is the restrict binge cycle, and I really encourage people to break it. So how do we even break it? The first thing that I like to do when I'm working with someone, again, I'm a dietitian, and what I say is the solution is to start eating regular meals and snacks. And that sounds extremely basic, but so many people that I've worked with have literally say, I don't know what that means. I don't know what it means to eat regularly. I don't know what I should eat for the meal. I have no idea. So I recommend trying to eat every 3 to 4 hours to get what I call your hunger and fullness cues established, and to have meals and snacks that have some form of protein, carbohydrates, and fats. And it does help to keep the blood sugar more stable, which can help you remain clear-headed as you're going through the day. Now, I want to talk for a moment about what I've seen with emotional eating and an emotional eating cycle. And I'm going to start on the far right. Something upsets you, so we call that a trigger. Something like having a thought, or let's just say you're sitting there watching television, and all of a sudden, something happens and you have an overwhelming urge to eat. Okay, so let's just say you have this urge, you start eating something, and then you eat more than you wanted. You have this overwhelming powerless fear, that feel powerless over food. You feel shame, negative voices, you're going to restrict tomorrow. And again, something upsets you, the trigger. And this is this emotional eating cycle that happens for so many people. So let's talk about how we can break this emotional eating cycle. Well, the first thing is to develop awareness. And there are 3 questions I like to have people ask themselves. And am I hungry? What am I feeling? And what do I need? So the first question, am I hungry? Again, not everybody knows what hunger feels like. So for some people, it could be feeling your stomach growling. It could be hearing your throat growl, having an empty feeling, having a headache that maybe it ranges from mild to intense, feeling dizzy, lightheaded. Maybe you're even grumpy or hangry. And so the idea is to think about, when you start to think about food, am I hungry? Hmm. So then the question is, if you think you're hungry, how do you know? How do you know if it's physical hunger? So the questions to ask yourself then are, when was the last time you ate? And what were the components of your meal or your snack? Because so many people that I work with will say, I I don't understand it. I feel like I'm always eating, I'm always hungry. And then we discover that they haven't eaten for like 8 hours or 6 hours, and they don't understand why they're feeling like they want to binge eat. And getting into this habit of trying to eat at regular intervals can really help you recognize true physical hunger. So now let's talk about this emotional eating and try to get a little better sense of what we can do about that. So let's say we start here, something upsets you, we call that a trigger. Again, you have this overwhelming urge to eat more than you want, feel powerless, feel shame, and the cycle goes on and on. What do we do about that? But the question then to ask yourself, when you ask yourself, am I hungry? And the answer might be no. Well, then what am I feeling? What am I feeling? Now, there's so many different things that we could be feeling, from fearful, angry, sad. We could be feeling joyful, surprise, shame, and so many other combinations of feelings. And it's challenging to really pinpoint what exactly you're feeling in the moment. And so often I will ask people to think about what they might be feeling in their body, whether it be, I have one person who always notices that when she gets stressed out, she feels it in her shoulders or feels a little like tight knot in her stomach. Just it's about starting to get awareness of your physical sensations. So, what am I feeling? And so then, if you know what you're feeling, or if you don't know, the next step is to think about, what do I need now? If we know it's not food, in other words, if you're not physically hungry, what might you need? So we have kind of three different strategies: find distractions, seek nurturing activities, and or deal directly with the feelings. So let's talk about those for a moment. Finding distractions. So let's say you are sitting at the table, you finished your meal, you know you're full, but all of a sudden you have this overwhelming urge to get something sweet. Are you really hungry? If the answer is, I'm not really sure, I think I'm not, I think I just ate, what do? You distract yourself, maybe go on the TV, go on the computer, dance, play a game, drive. And I always invite people to think about what their own personal distractions are. I'm just naming a couple, but the question is, what would work for you? If it's not distraction, some people like to seek nurturing activities like resting, relaxing, listening to soothing music. Maybe it's meditating. Maybe it's practicing yoga, playing with a pet, taking a walk. Some people tell me they like to knit or sew. You'll find what nurtures you and what feels right for you when you have an emotional urge to eat and you're not really hungry. Or you could deal with the feelings. And this really is like high level stuff. Some people feel like they're ready, they write in a journal, call a friend or family member, cry, breathe deeply, sit with your feelings, and learn how to let them diminish, which is what we're going to talk about in a moment. So let me make a general point about emotional eating. Often the questions to ask yourself: if you are eating emotionally more often than not, could you have an unmet need? It's possible. And particularly around midlife and menopause, are you getting enough sleep? We know that we often have hot flashes and our sleep is disturbed, and we might feel cranky, and it's our hunger hormones and fullness hormones are off, and it makes it harder to know what we're really feeling. And so eating emotionally is sometimes a result of that. Do we have balance in our family life, in our relationships? Do we have rest and play? And again, I talked about this hormones at play, not sleeping, not being able to sense true hunger and fullness. So all these questions to ask yourself. So, we've just been in this global pandemic. We're still in it. And I can certainly remember in the very beginning of the pandemic being stuck in the house and having virtually no pleasure and really thinking that food was the only source of pleasure. And I must admit, we ate emotionally quite a bit. And we just really understood that it was something that we were using food for making ourselves feel good. And we didn't worry about it. You hear so much talk about, I've heard it, gaining the quarantine 15. And, it's really overwhelming to think that anyone would need to restrict their food or watch what they're eating when dealing with the emotional stress and trauma of being scared for your life. So I really just wanted to make that point. But let me just say in general with emotional eating, I'm going to talk about this hard hunger for a moment because you kind of hear people joke like broke up with my boyfriend or my girlfriend and I'm going to go, drown my sorrows in a pint of ice cream. Food isn't a skillful substitute for personal intimacy, and we often do turn to food to fulfill our need for closeness with others. And that certainly is okay, but I think it's helpful to recognize it, to recognize hard hunger, and to learn to manage in other ways as well. Again, to increase your toolbox of things to manage your emotions. So now I'm going to talk about a way that we can learn to sit with our feelings. And this is just practice. Obviously, it's going to take quite a while to develop these coping tools, but we can become aware of the triggers for our emotional eating. And it is a kind of mindfulness training. And it is learning about coping skills that self-soothe when the potential urge comes on, because it is really challenging. It's challenging not just to manage, emotional eating, but certainly any other kind of urge that comes up that might be destructive. When I'm working with people with eating disorders, having the urge to have an eating disorder behavior or another behavior that's might potentially harmful, this urge surfing can really be a good way to diminish the intense emotions. So let's talk about what it is. So just think back for a moment to when you had an urge last, and we'll talk about an urge to eat something when you weren't hungry. You can sort of feel the urge like the wave approaching. Perhaps you can even see it from the distance. That's really what the trigger to the urge is, that you can feel it coming on. And next that urge, it's like the buildup, kind of like this wave. You can see it. The wave gets taller and it peaks. And that's really the most intense feeling of the urge at the very top of that peak. And so what do? It's in this moment when the easiest thing to do is to give in to that urge that we can think about what I call the 4 Ds: delay, distract, determine, and decide. Because we may want to give in to that urge. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. But let's see if we can learn how to delay the reaction a little bit. So what do? Let's pause and think about our choices. We can distract ourselves with some of those coping skills that I talked about. Give it a couple of minutes, 5 minutes, up to 15 minutes. After distracting yourself, think about it. Determine and decide your course of action. Is it acting on the urge? If that urge is to eat something, let's say you just hear the ice cream in the freezer calling you, or there's chocolate in the cabinet, or you want to have chips. You've delayed it, but you decide, heck, I really want it. So act on it. It's, you're the adult, you're your own parent. You absolutely have the ability to eat unconditionally. No one is in charge of you but you. Perhaps you're able to ride out the urge with some of those skills. Either way, you're able to make the choice. So I'm going to give you another way to think about it, and I'm going to show you like kind of a mindful experience, because many eating behaviors are reactive responses without thoughts, which is kind of mindlessness. For example, maybe it's a mindless habit like grabbing a handful of candy while you pass through the kitchen. But we can learn how to manage it. So we're going to practice in a moment this urge surfing, a reactive eating technique, which is really training for your brain. It helps you build patience. And this is really challenging when you're someone who's always multitasking and doing a million things at once. So I am going to ask you to practice every day at home, but I'm going to show you how to do it. You choose 5 to 15 minutes that you're willing to dedicate daily. Find a comfortable place to sit, either on a chair or on the floor. Close your eyes and follow your breath. Simply breathe in and breathe out at your natural pace. And just focus on your breath going in and out throughout your body. That's all you're going to do. You're going to just breathe normally. And if your mind starts to wander, simply redirect it to your breath as many times as you need to without judging, which so many people judge themselves. Just bring it right back to your breath. And that's it. That's the practicing mindfulness. That's going to help you with delaying and deciding. Because when you do part two, when you find yourself in a vulnerable position of having a craving or a desire to binge, see if you can commit to delaying the eating for anywhere from 5 minutes to 10 to 15 minutes. And keep in mind that the purpose of this activity isn't to stop you from eating. Rather, it's a practice for not reacting impulsively to a craving. And it does help you learn to temper compulsive eating or restrictive behaviors. So let's just practice this for a moment. And I'm going to invite you to think about taking a moment of silence because it is September 11th and we have a pandemic where hundreds of thousands of people have died, and including Black lives. And so let's take this moment while you're practicing breathing for your reactive eating to think about all these fallen individuals. So I'm going to ask you to take a moment of silence and breathe. Yeah, thank you for that. If you're watching this at a later time, know that this was a particular moment in history where we really needed to take a moment of silence. I'm going to give you a very easy way to visualize this in your mind. We had the image of the wave and the urge surfing, to be able to delay the emotion. But another way I like to think of it personally is to think about a stop sign. And a lot of the people that I've worked with have found this to be very effective. Whenever you have a craving or a moment that you feel like you must eat something, obviously the first question is, am I hungry? So I want you to think about a stop sign. Just literally put your hand out, stop. Just pause for a moment. That's S, stop. T, take a breath, which we just practiced. Take a breath. Notice your breathing in and out, in through the nose, out through the mouth, in the cycle. O, observe. Ask yourself, am I hungry? What am I feeling? What do I need? Just observe your body. See if you have tension in any particular area. See if you have any feelings in your stomach. What thoughts are in your mind? Where are you reacting to? What sensations do you feel in your body? And realize that whatever it is that you're feeling in this moment, just like surfing that wave, it will pass. So that's the observe. And then the P is proceed. What's the best thing to do right now? Is the best thing to do is it to eat? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Is the best thing to do is to distract myself? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. What about nurturing myself? What about journaling? What can I do that fits with my values? If my values are that I don't want to eat anymore when I'm really not hungry, or I'm really tired of binge eating, it doesn't feel good in my body, then, might be worth thinking about what skill you can use. And then think of what will be effective and appropriate in this moment. Now, what I'm showing you is a very simplistic view of how to manage emotional eating, but just thinking about that stop sign, even if you're able to delay acting on the behavior, even for a few seconds, it's like building a muscle. The more you practice it, the easier it will be. And that's the whole point of practicing when you're not vulnerable. And that's the whole purpose of mindfulness. Now, for some people, I just want to say that if you have a strong history of trauma or you have a hard time, just breathing, please, this is just an invitation. Obviously, don't do anything that's harmful, that makes you feel uncomfortable or bad. but just recognize you can try to breathe through your craving, and it can be very helpful. As I did this presentation, I'm laughing at this picture because this looks like me. That would be me if I had a craving and I needed to nurture myself. I would be in a fuzzy robe. I would not be looking at the light. I would have moisturizer on my face. I'd be holding my soft kitty. So whatever works for you in your own nurturing is the best thing to do. Okay, now, what is the deal with why do we even talk about midlife and menopause? Well, the first thing is we have attunement disruptors. And what does attunement even mean? It means becoming aware of the signals and sensations inside of your body. So when we're going through perimenopause, which happens in midlife, perimenopause is a period of time, usually sometime in our 40s. For some people, it's earlier. And I say people because not everybody who goes through menopause is a woman. It could be really any person who is assigned female at birth and has female reproductive organs and who has hormones that are changing, like estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. As we go through this period of time, as our bodies move towards menopause, which is when we stop menstruating, we have a lot of hormone shifts, which leads to poor sleep, mood swings, migraines, hot flashes. And it influences our hunger and fullness hormones, the leptin and ghrelin. And it really is challenging to be able to tell when we're hungry and when we're full. And so that's why I like to talk about emotional eating, particularly at midlife and menopause, because we're more prone to emotional eating when we don't have good sleep. So, during this period of time, this midlife and menopause time, so many people gain weight around the middle. And, it can be very, very distressing, as I'm sure you're aware. And the thing is, it's just really normal and natural. As our estrogen levels and our progesterone levels decrease through this period of time that we call perimenopause, we have a natural shift of body fat towards the center, towards our waist. And there's a reason for that. And that is that this extra fat that we might be having, this extra fat we deposit in around the middle, is a natural form of estrogen. So our bodies are really wise, and they can really try to keep us healthy. They try to keep us, estrogen is an important source of protection for our heart. It helps our joints stay lubricated and keeps us from being dry. It also is important for bone health, for brain health. So our bodies are doing just what they were designed to do. And it's normal and natural, but it's very distressing. And here's the thing, that weight loss diets are universally prescribed for anyone who is starting to gain weight at midlife. And here are the messages that we have about our health in the media and from the medical establishment. What we always hear is that health depends on weight. If you're thin, you're healthy. If you're fat, you're unhealthy. And we always hear, eat better and you'll be healthier, exercise more and you'll be healthier. But, I want to challenge this for a moment. And I want to say that I believe with authentic health that it's really more than just our body weight. And it's more than just diet and exercise. Because I believe that intentional weight loss, which is what's always promoted by doctors and Dr. Google, that weight loss is not necessary to achieve a healthy lifestyle or a quote unquote healthy weight. I believe we can live our best life and make peace with food in our bodies and recognize that as we age, our bodies are going to change. Our bodies are going to shift. Our bodies shouldn't be the way that they were when we were in high school or when we got married or when we first had our kids. Our bodies change as we get older, and it's a very normal and natural thing. Hard to accept in this world that says that we should all stay one size and that we should have anti-aging creams and not have any gray hair. But the fact is, we are going to change. So I think, let's start living today in our here and now body and make it the best it can be. So, the other thing about this message that we hear about losing weight is, the question, do weight loss diets really work? And I'm going to talk about that because we know that diets have a 95 to 97% failure rate. So it means that a third to two-thirds of all dieters regain more weight than they lost on their diets. It's actually a shocking number. And what we found is that there's a bias in weight loss research that shows people to be successful, but the studies usually only last 1 or 2 years. See, the most of the studies only look at the weight loss over this 2-year period of time. And, generally speaking, when someone goes on a diet to lose weight, and by the way, anyone can lose weight. The problem though is keeping it off, because people will have the lowest weight by 6 months, but then they start regaining the weight by a year. And by 5 years, 95 to 97% of all people will have regained all or more of the weight. Therein lies the problem. And then the cycle repeats itself over and over. You lose weight, you gain it. You lose it, you gain it. We call this yo-yo dieting. And it actually has a very negative impact on our body. It influences our set point weights. It influences, it causes inflammation in the body. There's a lot of negative consequences of going on weight loss diets. As I mentioned, the dieting slows down our metabolism because when we try to avoid weight gain, our set point weight goes up. And that's the weight that we're biologically programmed to be most comfortable in our body. When I talk about this with yo-yo dieting, people often start at a place, they go on a diet, they gain the weight back, they go on another diet, they gain more weight back. And this avoidance of weight gain actually leads to weight gain. You always hear people say, oh, I know I want to lose weight now, but I think, why wasn't I happy, 10 years ago? Why wasn't I happy 20 years ago? And I think it's so important that we start to really understand and accept that we have a genetic body type and that it's our job to take care of our bodies to the best of our ability and not just restrict our food. The thing about weight loss diets is that our bodies are so clever. When we're not eating enough because we're dieting, and our body doesn't think we're getting enough food, they basically try to hold on to the weight for everything they can. This is really why you'll hear people talk all the time about a weight loss plateau, because the harder you try to force your body into submission, the more it fights to keep you alive. And that is really what happens with diets. It's evolutionary. Our diets are our bodies are primed to keep us alive, and so our metabolism slows down when we're not eating enough. And then when we start to eat more, we gain even more weight back. And then what happens with the diets is that we end up bouncing between rigid food rules and then feeling out of control. This binge eating, emotional eating, other eating disorders, they cause this all or nothing thinking. We're having good food or bad food. Some foods are morally superior to others. And the thing about midlife in particular, and menopause, is that we need dietary fat and enough calories for our hormones to be healthy. And as we're going through this midlife period of time, we lose estrogen, and it's so important that we manufacture enough hormones, and we do need dietary fat for that. So this constant dieting impacts so many systems in our body. I want to share Jane's story. Jane was in my Intuitive Eating Essentials course, and she had been on a diet since she was 5 years old. Jane was in her 50s, so that's like 45 years on a diet. Her parents, especially her mom, was very focused on her weight. And she'd been on every single diet from a young age. I mean, you name it, Atkins, South Beach, ate diet candies, on and on, you can imagine. Constantly restricting, then binge eating. And she was so worried about weight gain if she stopped dieting. But she slowly started to make peace with food through working with Intuitive Eating Essentials and working with me. And she is slowly starting eating more freely, enjoying foods that she would never allow herself to eat, like chocolate or a piece of pizza. And she started exercising more because she actually likes to move. And here's what Jane said: my problems didn't disappear. They only got worse. Diets made me obsessed with food in my body, and not in a good way. Letting go of diets freed up a lot of mental energy for more worthy pursuits. It's a wonderful thing to think about, that when you actually let go of diets, you have more energy for worthy pursuits. Here's Kathy's story. Kathy had 6 months in programs. Here's Kathy's story. She was in my Intuitive Eating Essentials course and also did many programs with me. And it was finally by 6 months that she started to realize where her diet mentality came from, because she never thought that she was on a diet. She was never shamed about food from her family growing up, although she was always restricting without realizing it. And last week in my course, she finally realized that although her mother never judged her, her mom was always on a diet. It took Kathy 6 months to finally realize that. And as she continued working with me, she learned to eat mindfully, intuitively, to really understand about her emotional eating. And she was able to slow down. And she actually said to me she had a chocolate bar that lasted over 1.5 weeks in her house, which is really kind of amazing. And so here's what Kathy said. I was tired of worrying about what I ate and how I looked. I wanted the next 40 years of my life to be filled with joy in food, joy in movement, and joy in my body. I'm letting go after all these years because I finally realized that dieting serves no purpose. So, what a thing to understand and finally come to realize. To overcome the power that diets have on your life, I hope that we can understand the role that diet culture plays, learn about and practice the principles of intuitive eating, to learn about what I call health at every size, which is a social justice movement, and to recognize that all bodies deserve dignity and respect. So I've talked about intuitive eating several times. Like, what is it anyway? It's a process-based approach that teaches you to have a healthy relationship with food and break away from diet culture. It's a weight-inclusive, evidence-based model developed by two amazing dietitians, Elise Resch and Evelyn Tribole. It was developed back in 1996. And it's a book that's already been printed. It's now with the fourth edition. And it's been validated. It's a method that's been validated with over 120 studies. So we know it works. And the two key goals of intuitive eating are to cultivate attunement to physical sensations that arise within your body, which means to really start to listen to the sensations that you have in your body, to start to understand if you're hungry, if you're full, if foods feel satisfying. And really helps you understand what emotional eating is all about. And the other goal is to remove obstacles and disruptors to attunement. Attunement, again, being in touch with your body. So it really means challenging the rules, challenging beliefs, challenging your thoughts, challenging your behaviors, everything that you've been doing up to this point. It's about challenging that and those assumptions. There are 10 principles that we go over in intuitive eating. I believe that the first one's probably the most challenging, and that's really about rejecting the diet mentality, understanding the role of diets in your life, and challenging it. And there are these other principles there. It's not stepwise, honoring your hunger, making peace with food, challenging the food police, learning to respect your fullness, discovering satisfaction in foods, honoring your feelings without using food, respecting your body, exercising, feeling the difference, and honoring your hunger with gentle nutrition. Now, each one of these principles could be a whole course, a whole webinar. And so I'm just mentioning them briefly. And intuitive eating also, in my opinion, goes hand in hand with a concept called health at every size, which means that we recognize that there is body diversity in the world and that we want to work to separate our health from our weight because we know that body weight is not a behavior. Behaviors are things like eating more fruits and vegetables. Behaviors are things like exercising. But weight is not a behavior. So instead of focusing on the weight as we go through midlife and menopause, I really like to help people understand that lifestyle changes that result from learning about and practicing intuitive eating are more effective, they're safer, they're more long lasting. And I believe that authentic health can be achieved, as I mentioned, at any body weight. And body diversity is a fact of life. We're not all supposed to be the same. We have different color skin. We have different heights. We have different eye colors. Body diversity is a wonderful thing. And, it's really what makes the world go round. And I love this picture. This is a picture of me several years ago at an eating disorder event. And I don't know if you recognize the person on my right. Her name is Emmy, and she is the original supermodel. So Emmy she might be 6'1". You can see that she's significantly taller than I am. I think I'm 5 feet, but kind of shrinking. And if you look, our weights are probably different. Why should we all look the same? And so I ask you to think about, why should our weights all be the same? Why should we all expect to be small when our bodies come in all different heights. It's really no different. Weight and height should be different. They're no different. So I like to help people challenge diet culture and to challenge the cultural messages that only one size is acceptable and that diets are the only answer. Because let's think about, what is the origin of diet culture? Who told us we should all be one size? The problem with diet culture, which is really being told that we should all lose weight, that we're going to be healthier, we'll be better, it oppresses people who don't match up to the supposed picture of quote unquote health. And for example, it disproportionately harms women, femmes, trans folks, people in larger bodies, people of color, people with disabilities. We can't all be the same. And it damages mental and physical health. Self-awareness and self-compassion do help you challenge the cultural messages that only one size is acceptable. I love this quote from Naomi Wolf. She is a feminist writer who wrote The Beauty Myth in 1990. And here's what she said about diets and overcoming the power they have on your life. A culture fixated on female thinness is not an obsession about female beauty, but an obsession about female obedience. Dieting is the most potent political sedative in women's history. A quietly mad population is a tractable one. So what Naomi Wolf is basically saying is, when women are dieting and are starving, we're going to stay quiet. We're not going to have political action. We're not going to be part of the change. So I just invite you to think about this, challenge this notion. Now I'm going to talk about Intuitive Eating Essentials, an online course that I'm offering, which goes over all of the things that we've been talking about in this webinar. It is a course that is designed to help women at midlife, menopause, and beyond to feel good in their bodies and to give up dieting, to learn about foods and things that can help us as we get older, and to really transform our relationship with our body, to find our power. And it is an 8-week online self-paced program with live group support that's designed to introduce us to the concepts and deepen your practice of intuitive eating and health at every size. And it's for women at midlife, menopause, and beyond, learning and practicing intuitive eating. And it consists of a 30-minute private consultation with me, 4 live group support and training calls, and a private Facebook group with lots of support, and 8 training modules that cover the following topics. So this is the inside. We talk about what diet culture is and the harms of diets. We talk about living a valued life and really trying to understand what our truest values are, how important it is to take care of our body and our body image with compassion. We talk about honoring hunger and making peace. Really, these are all the principles of intuitive eating. The idea being that we want to feel good in our here and now bodies. We talk about challenging our negative and self-defeating thoughts, which I will guarantee every single one of us midlife women have about our bodies and our bodies that are changing. We talk about managing emotional eating, kind of similar to what I've been talking about here, and really understanding and respecting our changing body image as we go through midlife and menopause. And we talk a lot in our last module about gentle nutrition and strategies for heart health, strategies for breast cancer prevention and bone health, and things that really affect us midlife women. So we have 2 groups starting. One is on Tuesday evening, starts 9:15. One is on Thursday afternoons. And we again have 4 live group calls. The fee is $497, full pay, or 2 payments at $275. And if you are interested, you can email me. We can set up a discovery call right away. Or if you're ready to sign up, you can sign up at ericaleon.com/intuitive eating. And the purpose of intuitive eating is to help you gain your power back. You get enough mental energy to accomplish all the things that you want, because this third act, our midlife and post-menopause times of life, are the most productive. And let's use this period of time to be in our power and accomplish all the wonderful things that we still have time to do, instead of thinking about spending time shrinking our body and dieting. And so thank you for listening, everybody. Thank you so much, and have a nice day.